A seat at the table. The Galactic Council's Grand Assembly Hall was vast, an architectural marvel of ancient civilizations spanning millennia. The domed ceiling shimmered with holographic constellations, mapping the countless star systems under the Federation's rule. Delegates from 57 species sat in their designated sectors, each separated by transparent energy barriers that acted more as a symbolic divide than a physical one. Some species preferred isolation, while others whispered among themselves in hushed tones. But tonight, all eyes were on a single figure standing at the speaking podium. Ambassador Evelyn Carter of Earth stood poised, her dark blue diplomatic uniform pristine, her gaze steady. She was young by human standards, mid-40s, but among the long-lived races present, she was practically an infant. Still, she commanded the room with an aura of quiet confidence. It wasn't arrogance, nor was it submission. It was something else entirely, something alien to the Council's oldest members. The humans had only been part of the Federation for 3 standard cycles, barely a blink of an eye in the cosmic scale. Yet in that time, they had defied every expectation. Their technology advanced at an unnatural pace, their colonies spread like wildfire, and their warriors, well, the few who had seen them in combat whispered about it in wary tones. Evelyn cleared her throat. The assembly hall fell silent. The Human Confederation acknowledges the concerns raised by the Drax Empire regarding our recent colonial expansion into the Orion Arm. She began, her voice calm and deliberate. However, we must respectfully decline your request to halt our efforts. The worlds in question have been deemed unclaimed under the Federation Charter, and humanity has abided by all legal protocols. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species nodded in agreement. Others exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. But one figure was far from silent. A deep guttural hiss echoed from the far side of the hall. War Commander Kissick of the Drax Empire rose from his seat, towering over most other species present. His dark emerald scales shimmered under the artificial lighting, his slit pupil eyes narrowing. The Drax were a warrior race, apex predators on their homeworld, and one of the oldest empires in the known galaxy. They had ruled through sheer might for over 10,000 cycles. The Drax do not make requests, human, Kissick growled, his voice laced with barely concealed contempt. We issue warnings. Evelyn didn't flinch. Instead, she folded her hands behind her back, her expression as unreadable as the vacuum of space. Kissick continued, his voice dripping with condescension. Your species has existed in this council for less than a single cycle, yet you spread like an unchecked infestation. Your kind has no true grasp of the balance of power in this galaxy. You expand because no one has yet stopped you. Evelyn remained silent, allowing the words to settle. She could feel the tension in the room thickening, a suffocating weight pressing against the air. But she also knew something the Drax did not. The humans were always listening. From the human delegation sector, another figure subtly shifted. Admiral Jack Rains, Earth's highest-ranking military official of the Federation, sat quietly. His dark eyes locked onto Kissick with a predator's patience. Unlike the Drax, humanity didn't need to posture. They didn't need to bare their fangs to prove their strength. They simply acted when necessary. The council moderator, a neutral Tauran diplomat, attempted to regain control of the discussion. Perhaps we should discuss alternative solutions. Kissick raised a clawed hand, cutting the moderator off. There is only one solution. The Drax Empire will not tolerate further human expansion into our border regions. His elongated snout twisted into something resembling a smirk. You spread unchecked because you have never faced a true predator. A low murmur spread across the chamber. Some of the younger races watched in rapt fascination, eager to see how the humans would respond. The older, more experienced members remained silent. They had seen what happened when humanity was challenged. Evelyn took a single step forward. Let me be absolutely clear, War Commander Kissick. Her voice was steady, but there was an underlying force beneath it, an unshakable certainty that sent an eerie chill through the hall. Humanity does not seek conflict. We do not wish for war. A smirk returned to Keswick's face, as if he believed he had won. Evelyn's eyes locked onto his. But if you force our hand, we will respond. And I promise you, War Commander, you will not enjoy the outcome. The room fell into absolute silence. Keswick's smirk faded. For the first time, the Drax commander hesitated. The humans weren't posturing. They weren't issuing threats laced with empty bravado. There was no display of aggression, no raised voices or declarations of superiority. There was only certainty. The kind of certainty that only comes from a species that had survived against impossible odds. The kind of certainty that had allowed humanity to rise from a fragile planet besieged by extinction events, wars, and disasters, only to emerge stronger every time. The kind of certainty that made even the strongest empires in the galaxy stop and reconsider. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. Are we understood? Keswick's jaw tightened, his elongated nostrils flaring. The rest of the chamber watched in stunned silence. Then, with a slow exhale, he sat back down, folding his clawed hands over the table before him. It wasn't submission, but it wasn't defiance either. The council moderator cleared his throat, breaking the tension. Very well. The matter of territorial claims will be reviewed in accordance with Federation law. He turned toward Evelyn. The Human Confederation's expansion will continue under the existing legal framework. Evelyn nodded once. That is acceptable. With that, the session concluded. As the delegates began filing out, Admiral Rains leaned slightly toward Evelyn. His voice was barely a whisper. They won't let this go. Evelyn exhaled through her nose. No, they won't. She turned her head slightly, her gaze drifting toward the Drax delegation as they stalked toward the exit. Keswick's tail lashed once, a silent promise of retribution. Evelyn smiled faintly. Let them come. Humanity had been polite long enough. The storm beneath the surface. The corridors of the Galactic Council complex were eerily quiet after the assembly had adjourned. Streams of delegates from dozens of species moved in calculated formations, their discussions whispered, their gazes darting toward the human representatives as they passed. Some concealed their curiosity behind unreadable expressions. Others, like the Xilari, a race of cephalopod-like scholars, observed with barely hidden fascination. But Evelyn Carter didn't need to hear their hushed conversations to know what they were thinking. She could see it in their posture, in the way they held themselves, an unspoken question lingering in the air. How far would humanity go? She walked briskly through the hall, Admiral Jack Rains beside her. His expression was as impassive as ever, but she could tell he was reading the room just as carefully as she was. His military upbringing had honed his ability to assess threats in an instant, and right now, the entire council complex felt like a nest of vipers. You were holding back, Rains muttered under his breath. Evelyn barely glanced at him. Was I? Rains let out a quiet exhale, the closest thing he allowed himself to a laugh. You could have broken Keswick right then and there. Evelyn didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stopped at a reinforced doorway, guarded by two heavily armored sentinels. They weren't human, but the Council's neutral security force, uncompromising, incorruptible, and utterly devoted to keeping the fragile peace. A retinal scan confirmed their identities, and the doors slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside was a dimly lit conference room. The moment the doors shut, the atmosphere shifted. The room was secure, soundproofed, shielded against surveillance, and isolated from the rest of the building. It was the one place where humanity's leadership could speak freely. 3 figures were already waiting inside. Secretary General Alan Graves sat at the head of the table, his salt and pepper hair a testament to years spent navigating the brutal world of interstellar politics. His sharp gaze flicked to Evelyn and Rains as they entered. Across from him was Dr. Amelia Voss, Earth's foremost expert on xenodiplomacy, and beside her sat Colonel Isaac Herrera, a decorated military strategist. The room was silent for a moment, then Graves spoke. They'll come after us. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. Evelyn nodded, lowering herself into a chair. Yes, but not immediately. The Dracs are predictable. They don't strike out of anger. They strike when they believe they have the upper hand. Herrera leaned forward. And do they? Rains scoffed. They think they do. Dr. Voss adjusted her glasses. Their intelligence gathering on us is lacking. She tapped a small console, and the holo display flickered to life, showing intercepted Drax communications. They believe we're expanding recklessly because we've faced no real opposition. They assume we haven't been tested. Herrera folded his arms. Idiots. They're not idiots, Graves said. They just don't understand us. Evelyn exhaled slowly. And that's what makes them dangerous. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, Graves straightened. How long before they make their move? Evelyn's fingers tapped lightly against the table. If I had to guess, less than a cycle. Agreed, Rain said. The Dracs don't do open war unless they're certain of victory. They'll try something else first. Proxy conflicts, blockades, sabotage, something that gives them plausible deniability while testing our response. Graves turned to Herrera. How prepared are we? The colonel's expression hardened. We've upgraded every major fleet in the past 2 years. Our new defense grid is operational across 12 colonies, and the Black Watch is already in position in high-risk sectors. He exhaled. But if they push, we'll still be outnumbered. Rain smirked. They've got numbers. We got brains. Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. We've always been good at asymmetric warfare. Dr. Voss frowned. You're assuming we'll have to fight. Rains tilted his head. We won't start a war, Doctor. But if they force us into one. He leaned forward. We finish it. Silence. Graves eventually leaned back, running a hand over his face. All right. We prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But we do this carefully. The Federation still has rules, and we need to be seen as the responsible ones. Evelyn nodded. That's why I didn't break Kissick in that chamber. Not yet. A subtle shift in the room's energy. Herrera raised an eyebrow. So what's the plan? Evelyn's lips curled into a knowing smile. We let them think they're winning. Meanwhile, across the city, deep beneath the Drax embassy, War Commander Kasich stood in a darkened chamber, his claws drumming against a stone table. Around him, several high-ranking Drax officers watched as a holomap of the Orion arm flickered to life. A reptilian figure stepped forward. The humans refused our demands. Kasich bared his fangs. Of course they did. Another officer, a smaller but more cunning strategist, tilted his head. What are your orders, Commander? Kasich stared at the glowing representation of human expansion across the galaxy. So rapid, so unnatural. The Drax had ruled this space unchallenged for millennia. And now the balance was shifting. We bleed them, he said finally. We cut them off. We make them desperate. The strategist nodded. Sabotage. Kessich's nostrils flared. More than that. He turned, his golden eyes burning with malice. The humans believe they are predators. His voice was almost amused. We will remind them what true predators are. A murmur of agreement swept through the room. Kasich leaned over the table, his claws scraping against the surface. Start with their colonies. The Drax would not declare war. Not yet. They would strike from the shadows, erode human supply lines, push their fragile alliances to the breaking point. By the time humanity realized what was happening, it would already be too late. At least, that's what Kasich believed. Back on Earth, Evelyn stood on the balcony of the Human Confederation's diplomatic tower, staring at the distant glow of stars. She knew the Drax would move soon. She knew they would test humanity's patience. She also knew something else, something the Drax had yet to understand. Humanity had never been given anything. Everything they had earned through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Every challenge, every war, every crisis had forged them into something stronger. If the Dracs wanted to test them, they would learn, far too late, that humanity never broke. Humanity adapted, and when the time came, humanity struck back. The first strike. The silence of space was deceptive. Above the colony world of EO7, the stars shimmered like distant diamonds, unbothered by the chaos about to unfold. The human settlement on the planet's surface had been growing steadily for 5 years, a testament to Earth's rapid expansion. Crops flourished in artificially enhanced soil, towering skyscrapers housed thousands of settlers, and orbital stations provided a steady stream of resources. For many, EO7 was a new home, a fresh start. But for the Dracs, it was a target, a shadow in the dark. High above the colony, hidden within the vast emptiness of space, a Drax warship drifted silently. Its hull was covered in light warping plating, making it nearly invisible to most scanners. It had been waiting for days, monitoring human movements, studying their defenses. Inside the command chamber, War Captain Vekas watched as the final preparations were made. He had been given a singular mission: destabilize humanity's colonies, disrupt their supply chains, and weaken their morale. The humans had insulted the Drax Empire, dared to defy their warnings. Now they would learn the price of defiance. His second-in-command, a wiry officer with deep scars running down his jaw, turned to him. Weapons primed. Orbital defenses have minimal automated resistance. No military fleet in range. Vekis bared his fangs in approval. The humans have grown comfortable, he murmured. Let's remind them of the dark. The attack begins. It started with a single, silent pulse. A targeted electromagnetic burst rippled across EO7's orbit, disabling unshielded satellites and cutting off communications with Earth. The skies, once filled with the soft blinking of artificial stars, went dark. Then came the impact. A kinetic bombardment, simple but devastating. Hyper-accelerated projectiles rained down on the colony's infrastructure, striking key locations with terrifying precision. Power stations exploded into flames, landing pads crumbled under the force of the strikes, and the central city descended into chaos. The people of EO7 had never known war. Most had come here as pioneers, engineers, scientists, and families looking for a future beyond Earth. Now they were running through streets filled with fire, their world collapsing around them. Inside a hastily repurposed bunker, Governor Elena Vasquez gritted her teeth as the ground trembled beneath her feet. The emergency lighting flickered, casting the room in an eerie red glow. She turned to the nearest comms officer. "Get me Earth. Now." The officer frantically worked at his console. "I'm trying. They hit our long-range transmitters. Then use the backups." "We don't have backups." The officer snapped, his voice cracking under pressure. "We were supposed to get them next cycle." Vasquez's stomach twisted. The colony was advanced, but its defenses had never been a priority. It had always been assumed that any major conflict would happen in space, between fleets, never directly on the ground. They had been wrong. Humanity responds. Back in Sol Command, the distress signal from EO7 finally punched through the interference. Fleet Admiral Jack Rains stood in the war room, watching the fragmented transmission on the holo display. The feed was shaky, filled with static, but the message was clear. The colony was under attack. His hands clenched into fists. He had expected the Dracs to make a move, but not like this. This was not a test. This was not a warning. This was an act of war. Behind him, General Isaac Herrera swore under his breath. They're targeting soft colonies. No warning, no declaration, just straight to the killing. Rains exhaled slowly, forcing himself to focus. His fleet was stationed at Terra Prime, the closest military installation, but it would still take time to reach EO7. And time was something the colonists didn't have. "Mobilize the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet," he ordered. "Get them moving now." An officer hesitated. "Sir, that'll leave Terra Prime exposed." "Terra Prime can take care of itself," Rains snapped. "EO7 can't." The order was given. Within minutes, human warships were launching from their docks, their engines flaring as they jumped into FTL. But even at top speed, it would be hours before they arrived. And by then, it might be too late. The Resistance. Back on EO7, the colony had lost its main power grid, and panic had set in. Fires raged unchecked, people fled in every direction, and the air was filled with the sound of distant explosions. But amidst the chaos, a resistance was forming. Major David Connors had been stationed on EO7 as part of the local security force. He had never seen real combat before. No one here had. But as the Drax assault teams finally descended from orbit, he knew that waiting wasn't an option. He gathered what little remained of the colony's defense forces, security officers, ex-military settlers, and even civilians willing to fight. They had outdated weapons, limited ammunition, and no proper defenses. But they had numbers. And they had something the Drax didn't understand: desperation. As the first wave of Drax warriors stormed into the city, Connors and his makeshift army struck from the ruins. Snipers hidden in collapsed buildings took out enemy officers. Ambush teams used homemade explosives to turn the streets into death traps. Every inch of the colony was fought for. Every alleyway turned into a battlefield. The Drax had come expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves locked in brutal, close-quarters combat against humans who refused to die quietly. Vekis watched the battle from his command center, his rage growing. "They were supposed to break," he snarled. "They were supposed to flee." An officer looked uneasy. "They're adapting, sir." Vekis slammed a clawed fist onto the console. He could see it happening in real time. Human fighters learning, coordinating, using their surroundings to outmaneuver his forces. What should have been a massacre was turning into a prolonged engagement. The humans weren't just surviving. They were fighting back. The tipping point. As the battle raged on, a deep hum filled the skies. At first, it was distant, barely noticeable beneath the chaos. But then the hum grew louder, sharper, turning into a low, thrumming roar. A new set of lights appeared above the horizon. Streaking toward EO7 were the first ships of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, and they were coming in hot. The Drax warriors looked up in confusion. Vekis officers turned pale, and on the ground, David Connors smiled grimly. Reinforcements had arrived, and the real battle was about to begin.